I do think product management is very different in organizations. And I think that it's being a product manager at one organization is very different to another one. I think the most important job as a product manager truly, and the people who do it best, is you're responsible for every problem in the business to some extent. If you're not driving, if your company's not growing revenue, if you're not like retaining customers, you're not driving off, like, people will say those aren't product problems. They are, and they're very much a problem for you because that's the only reason you're building product is to provide like value at the end of the day. I think every product person should think like the CEO or like a co-founder, and I think that enables them to do like their job better. I'm Maxine. I am one of the co-founders of Arist, and I lead product. And we help leading organizations enable employees to do their jobs better through delivering training over like tech. So we replace a lot of that video-based training with digestible content that's super actionable, that's sent directly in Microsoft Teams or SMS or WhatsApp for a distributed workforce. So that's what I do. I worked before this out of high school. I took a gap year and I built out some education programs in rural areas around the US. And that made me realize that text message was a really personal way to reach people and to give them like aha moments and get them to change their behavior. But it wasn't being used in a formal way for learning. And so when I went to college, I met my co-founders and they faced similar challenges to delivering learning and education in remote areas around the world. So we all came together and were just really surprised by the fact that text message wasn't used for learning and education at all. And it's like the most common way of communicating in the world, like through technology. So we just, honestly, it was just such a simple idea. We couldn't get over the fact that it like wasn't used. So we started exploring it in college. And then here we are like 7 years later, still working on it.
That's super cool. The thing that stands out to me in like your story is problems that I've dealt with in like a large distributed workforce in Latin America. So we had to like train salespeople in Mexico, Peru, and they like we were giving them high bandwidth tools to do their job, which like it wouldn't load if you're going on site to like a farm or something like that.
Yeah.
And so the WhatsApp thing really like perked my ears because I was like, okay, maybe can you walk me through like the story of like how you came to that insight? Because it is like a pretty big reframe to have like those specific channels.
Yeah, it is. And it's such a big reframe that seems so simple to us that people push back for years on it, that people can learn this way. So what actually ended up happening was I had built out those education programs. I went to college, with this idea in mind of like, how do you create aha moments for people that change their lives, like teachers or parents maybe do, but in a scalable way through ed tech? And that was like the question I went to college with. And so I lived in a dorm that was like for entrepreneurs in college. And that's where I met Michael and Ryan, my co-founders. And we were just talking, and Michael was trying to teach entrepreneurship to a student in Yemen. And the student in Yemen said, oh, you can't send me like your normal materials you send me because I live in a war zone. And I can't load the videos you're sending me. And Michael said, we literally have a screenshot of this message. He said, what do you like have access to? What can you like read? And Mohammed, the guy in Yemen, goes, we're texting right now. So we can just text and you can send me the information this way. And Michael's actually, that's true. That's very true. And we were talking about this in a couple of days went by. And then Ryan, our other co-founder, was like, I teach public speaking to people like in all around the world because he had like clients where he would like educate them on public speaking. And he would like before their speeches, like often WhatsApp them, like, oh, remember to do this, or like, how did the speech go, or whatever. And I had this insight, which was like, I had built out like financial literacy training for students in like Native American reservations, like in the US. And no matter what I did to incentivize people to show up, I realized that just like most traditional education mediums, like classroom environments, like asking them to come to an additional after class for it, or like even watching videos is just so out of their normal day to day. It was like the medium I felt was blocking them more than like the subject. And I thought, wait, text would be like, they all text. It's super personable. No one needs to know you're going through this training. It's not embarrassing for teenagers. And so I thought, oh, this is like an amazing medium for this audience as well. And so I think we all had like our own sort of aha moments. And basically we decided if we could prove that like people engage with this media, it's really compelling because all of us were super curious people. We were learning a lot like in college on Twitter, like random things we read, things people said, right? Like bites of content, or Duolingo was picking up a lot of tracks at that time. And contrasted that masterclass with Duolingo. But we found for the masterclass with Coursera, you did 2 videos. Like, yeah, that was awesome. But you don't really finish the module. And so we were like, it's compelling that we're engaging people in this, because we built out like a course model, which I can get into, and like manually we're texting like hundreds of people to validate the idea for a long time. And no one would opt out. Like it got really high engagement. And we were super surprised because we and our friends and everyone like totally would sign up for like online trainings or like learnings and just stop after the one video or get to half of it. And it's not because you're not interested in the topic. It's because it takes so much time and isn't conducive to like your daily living. And so that was like a collection of moments that led us to invest more time into it. And we're in college, so we really treated it as like a research project for a long time. Can you build like an effective, quote unquote, like learning model around this that actually drives people to retain information better and take action based on what they're retaining, basically? Like those were the two levels we were going through. And so we would do 6-week research sprints to prove out different ideas. And so once we proved it worked, the hard part was like actually finding a market that accepted it, which could go into as well. But that we were exploring that in 2019, and you're trying to build like a marketplace. Learn from any professor. It was like masterclass, but over text was basically what we were trying to build. So like you could learn from, because we had like professors at Harvard we were working with and stuff who built content, and that model was just really hard to distribute. Like marketplaces are just really difficult to be honest. Yeah. And it was not really like good for a medium that people didn't already believe in. Like it was such a new idea that it was very hard from a distribution business model perspective. And so then the reason we ended up going to corporate learning was like we had a professor at the time who had been a former chief learning officer. I think it was at GM or something. And he was like, hey, by the way, millions of dollars are spent on corporate learning and it doesn't really drive like any sort of results. And this was like, CLOs were like, especially at that time, like very like prominent roles. There was like a new era of hiring CLOs like to work alongside CEOs and like learning, and organizations are becoming like super structured. And we were just like, but the bar was on the ground. Like, people hated it. Sentiment was super low. People didn't really change behavior. Like sure, like a ton of people have all these skills that they were like had acquired through training, but like it was never being measured. Are they actually doing their jobs better? And so what we thought was compelling was, one, we're really passionate about actually helping people. And this, like, through our own research and research done by other universities, PACS is a really good way to get people to change behavior. So we thought, where does learning need to change behavior? It's in the workforce, because you can learn outside of the workforce and like, it doesn't really matter if you change your behavior that much, but for the workforce, it matters a lot. So that's why we decided to go through like after corporate learning, and majority of people spend their lives in the workforce, especially frontline employees. They don't get any access to training that actually helps them level up in their work.
And I think anyone listening to this podcast that's worked for a big corporate knows that once a year you have to do your harassment training. You have to do your, well, now AI training, like compliant AI training, like anti-bribery training. And I've done like I feel like I've done like multiple learning management systems. And like, it's always like it sneaks up on you, because having to like focus on like videos. I mean, I admit sometimes they're entertaining when they like bring actors in to like act out scenarios, but it's almost like by design. I think by design, not intentionally, but just how it's designed is to be gamed. Like, how can I game this?
Yes.
So that I can get through the modules, get back to work. And like most people don't really have like the humility. They're like, oh, well, I'm not part of the problem in this training, and it's more of, I think the incorrect premise of like behavior change is that you could just educate people by like dumping them with content and like download
100%.
like data into them. And so, but it's not even just for like learning. I think that's like the premise for, I don't know, complex ERP systems. There's like, oh, we should make a name of your company academy so that people could like do courses to like learn how to do your work or how to use the tool. And like the roadmap item, we just need to educate them like that. I see that all the time where I'm like, or you could just make the product more intuitive. I don't know. But anyways.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I think also there hadn't been disruption in a really long time in like the learning management. There was like LXTs, which is an iteration of an LMS, but basically the same thing. There hadn't been that much disruption. And honestly, I think what we've realized is, unfortunately, it's also that person's job depends on them. Like, how is the success of their job evaluated? And for learning and development teams, unfortunately, a lot of them to date, like even now, are gold against, there is said training that's needed. Did you deliver on that? And so that's why they purchase content libraries. And some are still purchasing it in an era where like AI can generate any content in an instance, which like it really makes no sense. I think those businesses are like definitely not going to exist soon. But the fact is that they're gold against saying, yes, we have every single skill and capability. We have training for it in the organization. Therefore, we did our jobs. Or this sales leader came to us and said, my sales rep are hitting quota, create training. We made up what to create it. We delivered it. We had no idea. We're not responsible for the sales reps' outcomes or their performance at all. That's the CRO or like the sales director's jobs. And so like the KPIs just aren't properly, like the incentives are not aligned in the organization for them to actually adopt any sort of technology that serves like the end user or employee in any sort of way, or even their own group, which is, anyways, it's a mess, but that's held innovation for so long, I think, from like actually there's been no progress for a really long time. And for us, we had to get creative and going around to different buyers that were directly responsible for the performance. So like sales teams, like selling directly to like directors or like operational leaders, or companies were like learning and development or HR is like very operationally driven, like in manufacturing companies, because they're directly tied to outcomes, and Arist helps you get those outcomes faster because it's like basically instant enablement. Like we have an AI generator that creates content super quickly based on context, pushes it out to people over Slack, Teams, SMS. No matter what they see it, they respond to it. And then that increases the cadence of the company, right? When you're like filling gaps instantly, it really increases the cadence. So anyways, it's interesting. I think, the dynamics in companies definitely have a lot to do with what sort of technology is allowed to be adopted, and especially in large companies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you went over really fast. Like, I want to just double click on like a couple things you said, that like you targeted companies where the incentives were aligned, like where the core buyer was the person responsible for the outcomes, instead of like going to like the HR departments like directly. So you're saying like it's more, when you say operationally driven, you're saying like the segment is the people managers, like the directors, the VPs, they're also responsible for the education outcomes as well.
What's the purpose of training, right? Usually it's just to get people to do their jobs better, or some sort of business outcome. That's what it should be, right? So it's like, who is responsible for that person in the organization doing well and trying to go closer to that? So like, we actually didn't have this realization, by the way. Like we went to HR for a very long time and sold directly to them for 2 years. We had product market fit. And then what happened is 2021, 2022, the market got really confusing, enterprise/budgets. And where do they cut from first? HR. So it was a forcing function actually for us to find a better buyer, which is like usually direct business, like line leads basically is what we try to sell to. Of course, HR is part of the buying process, but is that friction of like their job. They're just not responsible for those outcomes. They're responsible for delivering training to enable those outcomes, which is why they're so bad at proving business value of like products they use also.
Yeah, this is a great example of product strategy isn't about filling up a backlog and like deciding which features will help like close deals. It's just figuring out like there's like a great article, I forgot who it was written by, it might be like A16Z like blog, that like the market, the most important thing is what it's called, and it's like the market, like what segment.
Oh yeah, I've read that. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. That you could just change your positioning in target segment and then sales go up. Like you don't have to add like more features, like
100%.
necessarily. Like of course you gotta do like table stake stuff, but like what I'm hearing here is like you've been doing this for 7 years, so that means that there's traction. You kind of had your hand forced. You said you started in 2019, and then COVID, all this macro stuff happened that forced you to be creative, but you're still around after all that. And would you say that is like a positioning change, like a target segment change?
Yeah, we've had to iterate on our positioning a lot. And candidly, like we are a new category without ever having created or yet a category, which is hard to sell. Basically been positioning not only on the macro level, but for account level, which is really painful. And for a while it was like hard to like lead product, because it's like we're selling all these different use cases, yet we don't want to productize those like pathways because we're not a sales enablement tool. We're not trying to like compete with iSpot directly necessarily or whatever. We're like really good for this part of sales enablement, this problem that's not solved. So I think it has been like a positioning like use case like battle, to be honest. Like we sell one use case, we expand by selling more, but we're starting to have like patterns and scale from there. But it has been a long journey, and it's similar to it's convincing people to not use a tool that they're used to going to and going to us instead. I think there's like some articles and Figma went through this a little bit, right? It's like, how do you get designers to go into Figma? And it did take a long time for Figma to get like traction, right? And like they had to do that. They had to change people from like their default behavior of going to other tools as a solution. For us, like learning designers, for people who create content, like that whole funnel and process, like it is a challenge. And we're still going through that. But like, how do you get people to completely change? Like, whatever, like this problem comes up, I'm going to go to this tool instead. I think we're doing some things with AI to like help with that, like control like the needs assessment piece, or building an AI tool to basically go out and like interview employees, pull data from different systems, and then surface the most important gaps at aggregate levels, and then feed it to, and then that agent works with our creation agent to basically build content as version to different roles or audience groups. And then it can be pushed out instantly. So that's a compelling way for us to get more into the strategic side without someone opens our app, right, on the admin side. Like it helps make us more strategic, but it is a challenge. Like it's a completely new tool. And I think, honestly, like the macro environment has helped. We've been pretty lucky in some, not in all cases, but in some cases, like with 2020, like we were about to shut down. And then 2020 COVID happened, and all these like people we had pitched to who thought we were like crazy. It was like no employee was like, it's going to go through text learning or Microsoft Teams training. When COVID happened, they're like, we literally can't engage our workforce. This is a perfect solution. And our bet at that time is starting to become really true now, which is that like communication, employee engagement, and learning are like converging into one sort of category. And because there's so much transformation in businesses, all those three things are like pancakes. And like our tool is a conversational interface that goes directly to people in the flow of work. It's the best tool to do all three of those things super well. So we're starting to take more like budget from those categories as well. It's amazing. It's super in depth. It's super amazing, but there's so much employee fatigue on actually like filling out a whole 20-minute survey, to be honest. No one wants to do that. So it's more like, how do we just keep a pulse in our organization through like micro touch points, voice agent conversations, things like that, and then funnel that back into the right stakeholders internally to take action on it. Anyways, I have so many thoughts. There's a lot of things that have played out with time, but it's taken a lot longer than we thought. But we saw the early signs of in 2020. Also, AI, like in 2020, wasn't realizing like conversational interfaces were it's like
It was
now it's
cute.
really
It
blown
was a
up.
cute thing.
Yeah,
It was like,
it was
oh,
a
this is
cute
neat.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's literally in our, I think it's in our like seed round pitch deck is, oh yeah, we'll build in like conversation, like we'll build in AI into this, because OpenAI was starting to share more stuff then. But it was so bad at first, like even our employees were like, okay, yeah, I want to release this, whatever I had released at that time. But now it's because of that, it actually increases adoption of our product too, right? Because we're a conversational interface. And so are a lot of AI tools, which is actually, we've been really lucky with that like trend and timing.
Yeah.
And we're text-based before images and video, before you could generate those things with AI. Like that still needs improvement. It's pretty good now. But we were the first like content generation tool that had AI generating it, because it was text-based training. We didn't need to generate like these in-depth trainings with videos, whatever, which was hard to do with AI 2 years ago. So it's really good for us.
I don't know if you listen to Gustav Sonderstorm's podcast, like a Spotify product story, which is like a true crime documentary format.
Oh no, I haven't.
The whole Spotify story from their head of product.
I know that.
Yeah, it's really entertaining. But he talks about this concept of macro wins, right? So like we had one episode where they basically just accept the premise of, okay, you're already like in flight, but you have to convince people that you need to change the engine. So like the macro win was like seeing a new distribution channel, the iPhone, like the mobile phone, and they were a web-based app at the time. And I'm old enough to remember when I used Spotify, like in my browser, like my mobile browser.
Really?
And I was an early adopter of Spotify. And
That's so.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting is like they had to make a pretty big like bet on like this new enabling technology and like switch things over. And it sounds like your company, you're right. It's like luck. It's like there's like a macro wind that you got to like take advantage of. I'm sure like not intentionally, like because the idea is good. And this goes back to like another idea about like Apple, like Tony Fadell, like created like Apple's creative selection process, where it's this iterative prototyping where they know the idea is good. And just because like the first iteration didn't work doesn't mean that the idea is not good. And they just continue to relentlessly iterate, try different enabling technologies, try different approaches to the problem. And so like my next question is like, in the world of AI, a lot of the pop culture implementing AI products is a concept of product operating like a forward deployed engineering org. where you are kind of like doing like professional services, tailoring
Yeah.
it. And you mentioned that like that's kind of like what you had to do for a little bit until you started identifying patterns. And so I actually just doing like the custom software approach, because AI requires a ton of evaluation, like oversight, but eventually you start identifying patterns, and then that's when you productize. Would you say that like that's where you would align with? Like I gave you a ton of preamble and setup. Like
Yeah.
I'm really geeking out now, but yeah, how has this changed your opinion about pop culture, like product
Mhm.
management and product leadership as you've gone through this journey?
Yeah. I feel like a lot of, I'm going to be honest, I feel like a lot of it is renaming. Like we've had solution engineers for a while. There's always like aspects of your software you have to customize, and like there's a
Yeah.
layer to that and aspects where you don't. And I've only been in software like, 7 years, I guess. So like I can't speak to before, but I do think that I think a lot of the AI do this ad is not that different from what's required for like enterprise software deployment. I think the development of AI, it does require a different like life cycle and does require different concerns than like normal software. But I think like the deployment especially in an enterprise environment, there's security concerns, always security concerns. There's infrastructure concerns, always infrastructure concerns. There is like finding valid use cases for it that actually provide value. Same thing in software, right? There's a lot of similarities. I think with us being a small company, by default, we had a forward deployed engineer model, you know what I mean? Like our founding engineers were talking with customers. Like I am the co-founder leading product. Of course, I'm bringing back patterns and we're iterating and building that as a product, right? So I think a small company just like by default uses that model. I do think Palantir like scaling it and all of that. I think the article like interesting, the pop culture, like it's like an interesting way to look at it. I think it looks a little different in every company. It depends who you're selling to. It depends like if you can afford that Palantir scale and like their business model, like they could afford that services cost for a very long time. So I think it just depends, but I think it is 100% true that with AI, like, yes, you need to customize, especially the data engineering, context engineering, and like the evals part of it. I think like any AI tool to be effective, truly as part of the workflow, especially like agentic AI, which is really just like a workflow, right? Like needs to be done through that model. There's just no way that like you can just take an AI tool and just apply it to an organization and be like, yeah, just connect it to these sources and it's going to work perfectly. Personally, I've never had that experience. Not even with like ChatGPT plugging it in, like their enterprise. What is it, like the company context now? Like it requires like customization, like true thoughtfulness. Also, this rant, but like especially the organizations I work with, like my concern for AI adoption is not at all technical advancement. It's for like LLM like being good enough, or engineers figuring out how to apply. It's like truly companies need to figure out how to keep data clean and for to keep it at a level where like AI can speak to it, so that they could bring in AI vendors, or AI is just embedded into the vendors that like have all the data or something like that. Because some organizations, their data is everywhere. It conflicts between different systems, like documentation is not up to date, all these things, right? So for AI to act on behalf of a person or recommend the right things or whatever it's doing, it needs to have that right data. And I think there's like progress there, but like a lot of organizations, at least that we work with, are super behind from that perspective. So it's like us consulting as a vendor also, here's how your data structure needs help. Here's the data like accuracy. Are we going to solve the problem of saying, oh no, we're not using this document, or it was changed, this other document was like, is similar, or is the source of truth? Anyways, there's just challenges there that I think they are talked about, but like sometimes I do feel like they're underplayed, and it's just like this hype of, oh yeah, AI is gonna take over every workflow. And it's, yeah, if you truly try and work very hard to implement it, it does. But I think that it will take time, especially in some organizations. Like, anyways,
Yeah.
I'm curious, honestly, for your like market observations there or other people you've talked to, but I do think that we're a little more behind there than people give us credit to. And that's like enterprise like environments. That might be different in other industries, but
Oh, well, I'm sure in enterprise, it's one of the things I like doing on the show is tie it to like other guests. So I got to talk to the VP of product for Finn, like Intercom's AI agent, and he brought up, they call it R&D services, but it's basically, yeah, like you said, the renaming for deployed engineering, where they just know that it's like, okay, their pricing model is per outcome. So like you pay for every resolved support ticket that didn't require human intervention. So so you don't have to pay if they escalate to a normal customer support, like a human. And so it's really just based off of like, hey, we need to have a really strong resolution rate. And the insight was that we have to have kind of like these like forward deployed services. To your point, you basically explained the root cause of like this reemergence of forward deployed engineering is that every client is a special snowflake. It is
Yeah.
operated in its own special way. I mean, I think like Salesforce became dominant because it, like everybody manages their sales pipeline differently, and you need to have like this high level of like flexibility and to even be able to benefit from the tool. And that's like
Yes.
why competing CRMs have been able to like unseat like Salesforce unless they have like a comparable like solution architect ecosystem to implement the tool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. Intercom. Yeah. Finn. That was a great like comeback for that product. It's a really good product. Intercom was like so expensive. People didn't want to justify whatever, but that Finn is really well done. I was listening to a podcast with their co-founder who like came back in and was like, "We need to change the organization." That was a great. I don't know whose
Yeah,
podcast that was on, but it was really good.
yeah. I think that was Lenny's podcast, but it was
Lenny's
just yeah,
probably
just like it was a super mature SaaS company, one of the co-founders, and like he
yeah.
eventually just took a sabbatical for personal reasons. Probably was thinking about, and he was like thinking about the next thing he's going to do, and then he got his Steve Jobs moment where it's like, oh, I need to come back, turn around the company. There's like huge churn. You have to like also kind of rip out the culture that was causing the stagnation in the first place. Johnny Ives biography right now, and this story's been told in a lot of different biographies, but like when Steve came back, he basically created like a 4x4 matrix and said, this is our product line. And like on one axis, it was like personal business. And then on the other axis, it was a portable desktop. And the overlap was like, okay, personal devices that are for the desktop, portable, business devices that are for the desktop, portable. And like relentless like focus on going very like feature, I wouldn't say like feature plentiful or like creating as many features as possible, but going like feature rich, because that's at the time like personal computing was a big macro win.
Yeah.
And when it was a win too.
Yeah.
It was a macro win too.
It was a macro. Yeah. So interesting. Yeah, I think that our CEO, like my co-founder, is very good at that, like holding to like the macro stance. I think it's like very easy in a business to like, especially as a startup where like you just really want the wins and like you want to explain things in ways people understand. And it just takes a lot of positioning iteration to stick to like the macro versus saying there's tons of companies. Honestly, there are other companies that have built like text message learning, whatever, but they're just like, oh yeah, we're a tool for learning designers. And they don't really see that like learning designers won't be there. That's like 2 years ago when they built the product. So it's just like, they don't pick up it's not, it's different. It's a different way of building a business, I think. But it does require someone who like takes the right macro bets, which you need someone who can do that, I think, which I would say, my co-founder is like pretty good at that. But I think some people are as kind of seeing the macro, unfortunately. But it's also something you can practice, of course, talking to people and on the head. One thing I think is interesting is like the benefit of enterprise or like selling to enterprise in like HR or like L&D, where it's so stagnant and no innovation. You can take all these trends from like these other developer tools or trends from the really like whoever adopts things like first from like those markets and apply it to like enterprise software. It's just like groundbreaking or so much more, I don't know, innovative to them or whatever it is, right? So I think that's an advantage as well. Like when you're building in a space that's like very old school or stagnant or something.
Yeah, and also it's like making sure that your marketing and like your message of like how you go to market with like this macro win you're not like marketing genre of like, oh, we're on like Spotify didn't say like, oh, we're gonna go mobile first, and then like on our website we're a mobile first music platform.
Yeah,
like, they didn't. Yeah, it's like it's an enabling technology. It's like, oh, this is probably going to be how distribution wins, and then they then figure out like how to sell the outcomes of like, well, using like this method of like a macro headwind enabling technology, this is how your life looks different, right? Like I think, and
I love that position.
Yeah. So sometimes I feel like product leaders aren't like good at that. Like, maybe like the CEO or like the chief commercial officer, they like really get down like the segmentation. They're like, oh, this is
Yeah.
like where it really vibes that we could target, and then like product doesn't harmonize with it. So like you sound very harmonized with like your co-founder.
Yeah.
That yeah. So like what have you learned about like figuring out like the commercial strategy of like where you're gonna focus? And I know it's like it's definitely iterative, like you're trying out different things and stuff, but making sure that the
Yes.
product roadmap actually aligns with like the go-to-market motions, and that product isn't just off in their own like silo, making things that don't actually
Yeah.
land.
Yeah. It's crazy. Like, I have so many thoughts about this. So one, I'll just say, like, I'm in a position where I'm a co-founder, so it's very different than maybe you're like
Average
just
corporate.
one product manager and like a huge group of people who's very disconnected from like commercial teams. But the benefit of this is that, so there's this quote that I love, which is plans are useless, but planning is useful. And I feel like that's like really true in a startup, right? Yes, you have a vision, but I used to get so frustrated when I'm like, this is our roadmap. And then I like realized that it's like changing, right? It's like, no, that's not like what used to be optimizing. Yes, it feels really good to deliver on things that you say like you're going to deliver on. But what feels like way better is that like you change industry, you change the way people work, you change like people are buying something that's like actually providing like value and stuff. Because a roadmap often becomes like a ton of things people ask for, to be honest, instead of what you're trying to build towards over time. So back to your question, what I've learned with the go-to-market is iterating like constantly. And I think product, like a lot of PMs just like really want to feel good. I always say this, and I don't think people resonate with, but I feel like product like sometimes feels, oh, I have a sense of like control. Like I have the roadmap and we're delivering on it. And like this experience is like perfect. And it's like exactly what people think they want and whatever. And that all feels really good. But I feel like some of our best features are like where it doesn't feel good. It's, oh, we shipped this like a little too early, or oh, we like shipped this to see if like we could market it, or hey, we marketed this 5 months early and built it in a funny way. Like I feel like that's a lot of product, and just it's like being in lockstep with the market is actually what I feel like personally, what I feel like product should be doing, which is like for me, go to market's my co-founder. So we just are talking every day. And it's like, what did this client say? What did this client say? If we do this, what's going to happen? And so like, it is a lot of iteration. We always have our like roadmap of what we're working toward. And then things like, I try to segment it. What are we working towards trying to build? What are we trying to build to convince people? What are we trying to build because like people can't scale without it? Like it's literally blocking adoption. And those are the customer requests I take. It's like literally like we would have 5x volume if we ship this feature, right? Like those are the types of things I try to do. Not, oh, I would really love it if this was like you could add this to a course. And it's like you get a lot of those nagging like requests. And yeah, it helps with satisfaction, but it's not really like helping that organization do learning differently. And I saw like in the beginning, we fell into the trap of, oh, but this LMS has this or this LMS. And it's like we wasted like 6 months of our roadmap just adding those things when really what we're building is like fundamentally so different. And we are very different because we're building something that doesn't exist. So I feel like I have the agency in these meetings with executives to be like, that's actually not our perspective. This is what we're trying to build. This is the type of enablement that you should be doing in your organization. This is how it's going to look in 5 years. Trust us. And it like makes them back off a little bit. Versus if I was like rebuilding an LMS, I would have to be like, oh yeah, okay, we have to put this in the product and we just have to have feature parity. So I feel like it depends on like where you're building product, but Spotify is a little similar. I feel like they had a different way of looking at things. So like they could build it in their own way. I feel like having like being in a position where doing that is like very nice for product, because you can have a stance and then you can say no to things with in a way that like makes you feel like a consultant, not like you're saying no and hurting their like satisfaction of your customer service. That makes sense. But yeah, those are some mornings. But I do think product is really iterative. And I've found personally, I just hired a lot of PMs, and this is probably my management skill too, that didn't work out. And I feel like it's because they wanted to like, no, but we decided we build this, or like not changing it, or no, like I'm delivering on this and the client will be happy if I do that. And so it's not enough like flexibility and okay, we have to iterate, or I don't know how to explain it, but I just found a lot of PMs like are as iterative as I'd expect, I guess, where it's like you're literally designing something like new, you're bringing it to life. Like it's, I don't know, comfort with that ambiguity and like figuring out how to make it seem perfect for the user, but it's not really like exactly what you want it to be in 6 months from now. So yeah.
Yeah.
But
Oh, yeah. I love the angle there that you explained the anti-pattern, and maybe we could try to get it into an articulated sentence as like a goal
yeah.
for this conversation, because I agree. It's product as a very highly leveraged department coming from a design background where I am like you develop that muscle of like ambiguity and iteration and concepting. It's like part of the
Yeah.
profession. Like you're incentivized to overturn every rock. Do you think it like is the incentives of a typical product org that like causes this lack of like flexibility?
Yeah, I do. I think it's incentives. I also think a product often is just like it's in a position of leverage, but that's also because it's in the center of everything. So
Mhm.
what happens is I don't know if it's incentives, but it's like expectation management from other teams to let product breathe a little bit. Personally, I feel like we run into that in the beginning. Like it's like product very easily gets like this, like smushed, right? Like you have like
Yeah.
sales that want something they think they can't sell without it. You have CS, like every CSM telling you that, at least in enterprise, like if you don't deliver this for my customer, they will churn on every single feature. That's how it used to be, especially in the beginning of our company. So it's like you have that, you have sales saying this, and then me also as a founder, you have this like vision of what you want to build, and like those things conflicting with that. And I do feel like, at least for us, because it used to be like very much a delivery motion, I was like, we have to get out of this because we're literally just never innovating because we're just delivering on like these needs. And it wasn't like our at that time, to be honest, there's a lot of macro reasons, but like our retention wasn't that amazing. Like it wasn't driving the results that I hoped in the beginning. And I was like, okay, something very wrong. So what I did, I was like, we need breathing room. Like one, this is how you deal with customer requests, and not from a process perspective, but like here are the types of things you say to these requests that we get that are very common. That's not our perspective. We're never going to build that. I'm not having a conversation. For sales, sell is on the boat. If you can't sell that, people don't buy into the idea, and they're not going to buy the next thing we build either. So there was also like that sort of like ground setting of, okay, just like everyone like take a deep breath. So I could not have a motion that was just like always felt like 12 weeks behind. And then whatever we delivered 12 weeks from then wasn't driving the value. So I felt like I really had to like parse back like the focus of what is our perspective, what's our vision, and then enabling the entire company as much as possible on that vision so that they would know how to say like why they're saying no to something. No, we actually don't have a one-on-one like coaching product, and here's why. And we will never build that. Here's why. Them being able to say those things is super valuable because then you don't get all the incoming like requests to product demands. But yeah, incentives, I think like of course play a role. It's like where is that person evaluated on a lot. I've heard a lot of podcasts, and I've never figured this out for myself, but I've heard a lot of product leaders be like, yeah, you're not optimizing for delivery and timelines. I think that's bullshit. I think like a product manager's job is to fabricate timelines and get the team to ship to some extent, especially in a small startup where it's not like clear engineering management and stuff. But I think it's like you have to do both. And then whatever you are like pushing to sprint towards delivering is tied to some like very specific, like you can literally name the customer and user that it's like adding value to. It's not like some ambiguous idea that like people are screaming about internally. So I felt like doing a lot of like internal like resetting and like enablement and stuff that got us to a better position. But I think for it, I would be curious to hear like what other people have done to get out of that most. And I feel like every company goes through a period where it feels like it's more focused on delivery than value, but maybe not all, but yeah. Here is a company I feel like that never has gone to that. They're always like, they don't listen to our customers. We just sell what we think. But I think also their environment and who they're building for allows for that to some extent. But I love Linear. I think everything they ship, I'm like, I needed that. Like, I just thought of that. So it's like amazing.
Yeah, I think whenever I haven't had a ton of like big examples because this is thematically, I guess, in this chapter of the podcast, something I've been really focusing in on is like making sure that product and like the commercial like motions are aligned. Is that companies that I feel like there is that breathing room, like everything you just described is like getting alignment on what game we're playing, like how we're going to position, what segments are we focusing on, who are we not building solutions for, because then when those requests come in, it's like we're not for this person, let them churn. Like we don't want to like keep this account, and that's really hard to do. It takes a lot of like courage to just be like, we're not going to try to retain this customer because they're not fitting within like the game we're trying to play of like who we're going to position to, who we're going to segment to.
Yeah.
And do you also feel like, because now you've really hit a rhythm in like a segment that's like, okay, the buyer is also the accountable party for these learning outcomes. Do you feel like that helped with breathing room at all? Like once you started like getting success?
Yeah, go to market is everything, like for product, I think. Like it's that's why it's so valuable, obviously, for product to get involved too with go-to-market, is because like that, it helps with retention, it helps everything. Like having the right buyer helps with, it's literally, that's like the point of a business, right? But yeah, it helps with everything, and it helps with breathing room a lot, was like finding the right like buyer and like better product market fit. That always helps. I think navigating product early is just so hard. Like without product market fit, it's so difficult. Like it was so painful. Like it was so painful for us, because we're like, not just, we also built a product that was like so new. It wasn't even like a familiar concept to people. So it was like that plus not really having a market. And it was just like, yeah, it was a lot of eating glass or chewing glass for a long time. But yeah, that helps a lot.
Yeah, because whenever I feel like I'm in those death march scenarios, it always is like an identity crisis at like the leadership level of like, what are we? And there is no definition. It's like the positioning is like, well, we're like the all-in-one platform. How often is that positioning used by SaaS companies? Like, we're all-in-one.
Yeah.
Like, we're everything. So like, you should buy us. Like, and then you're never. Here's the trick: is like
never everything.
Yeah, you're never everything. Like it's like guaranteed vaporware whenever you see that kind of stuff. And so, like, what linear is great at, like, so one of my favorite like, I've seen a slide that I think Kari, like the founder of Linear, he put like an all-hand slide of like 5 years, like, who are we going to focus on? And so the first year is just like your friends, and we're just going to be like like an issue tracker, like specifically, and get feedback from friends. And then it's like, okay, personal network on like small startups. And then the next year it was like, okay, now we're going to like get all the table stake stuff round out because we want to get to these like mid-market startups. And then like the 5th year, it's like go in on enterprise because they've like rounded everything up. Yeah, very clear like objectives. And like I've heard their CPO like say, oh, yeah, if the request is like a dashboard, we like defaults no. We're counter positioning from like Atlassian, where like a lot of their features are really just to enable better roll-up tables to like managers. And they're like, no, like we're here for like the people doing the actual work. And like they're very clear on that and like going deep on that. And then ironically, like the roll-up tables are better because people are using the tool.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I love Linear's approach to product, and their product, everything's super clear. Yeah. I think that something that helps there is it's a well-defined like problem, and everyone who's building it has experienced that problem and also has like very much used like the dominant solution for a long time. Like I think that for us, we're like 18 Con, I've never worked in corporate learning. We had a solution that we think is good for that problem because we have a very different vision of how like the future of work will look. But I think like the navigation has been like quite difficult, but we've gotten better.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different game, right?
Yeah.
You have a strong thesis on like enabling technology. And then Linear's like has a strong thesis on like how work tools should work. So it's more of like a philosophy, and they're taking advantage. I mean, even in their hiring strategy, taking advantage of this dissatisfaction with how like enterprise software and like project management software has been developed over the last few years. And it's resonating because people are like how many SaaS companies have a job board of companies that use their product? Because I want to use Linear, and it's like, here's companies that are hiring that use Linear. So if you want to use Linear, it's this like ideological like macro headwind. But I think it's funny. That's always like this. Like
I saw like it was like they had a design at like Lovable or something, or someone like that, and they were like, oh, now it's like in job description. And I was like, that's a really good like nice benchmark of your product is loved and used. It's like the holy grail, right? Is that it's in like someone's job description, or it's in someone's like resume as well. Like that's like a skill that they have. So I love that. It's a really good like thing to work towards.
Yeah, some of the best like B2B products, it's knowing that something is great is free word of mouth marketing. It's just like, I'm using this because I can't live without it. And every company I go to, I recommend we switch over to it. It's like all preference. And so ironically, we've talked about very minimal roadmap this whole time, but like the whole conversation on like, how do you actually get adoption? How do you actually convert? How do you get a clean roadmap? It's just being very clear on what game you're playing, like who you're going to. And honestly, once you dial that in, like the roadmap will take care of itself. Because like when I was working on like a ton of like internal tools, it was because our go-to-market was very like concierge, like it's a very high ticket customer, and everyone's, no, we need to make customer facing experiences. What are we doing here? We're not innovating. But every time I ship like an update to like the enabling like platform for the service experience of this financial service, things get better. Customer sentiment goes up. Like we're able to like resolve customer problems. And also these customers, this market, use a lot of WhatsApp. They don't want to log into a web portal, like a web 2.0 portal. They want to just get an update like that's relevant and timely. So yeah, it's like, it was easy to get those initiatives funded, even though everyone was kicking and screaming, like, it's internal tools. It doesn't,
Yeah.
like, it just doesn't matter. Balance sheet says it matters. So I think it's just having that maturity to like not follow like pop culture trends on like, but I can't put it on Dribble.
Yeah, I think also like the desire for, or like the need to show so much like product progress that's like innovation can be very like harmful for startups, especially like where we're selling to like the enterprise. Like a lot of what the value that we could provide to them depend on things that are behind the scenes and like tracking. Like for us, like we're a really high risk tech product. Like they're used to publishing content to a web app that maybe 1% of people log into unless it's compliance training. And now we're asking them to blast 50,000 employees with training like right in front of them. That's high risk for them. They need really good tracking and visibility, whatever. What are we going to like launch on LinkedIn or make some like really sexy video about, oh, we have this new tracking for each like message that goes down? No, but no one's going to use our product if we don't have that. So I think that, yeah, I think you have to get creative there to create room for sort of product to do the right thing, because there are periods where it's not to just add another feature or AI feature or whatever. And I think it's a dangerous market right now. Like every company launching AI feature like every week. Yes, anyone can build an AI MVP. Like it's really not hard, and like you can easily add that to your product. Does it provide value to your customers? Can it be implemented? Like those are the real questions that I think are important to think about, like other than just, oh, we need more leads and we're going to launch another product for that. There's other ways to do that, and you should definitely fight back from perspective, I think.
Yeah, and what's the core, like what's the target segment when you're just talking about technology? Like we have stablecoin, we have, I don't know, AI. It's investors.
It's like people who love pet, or investors. Yeah, it's investors or people who, yeah.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
what it is.
We're like, it totally makes sense. A Stripe could sell that stuff because
Yes.
The Stripe is like the SaaS economy or the e-commerce economy. But if you're like just a normal B2B content management system SaaS company,
Yeah.
like your target segment isn't going to care about stablecoin. They're not going to care about, they care about faster settlement times. Like they care about AI. It's like they care about at least not having to memorize a bunch of prompts to like get information faster, or like information organized faster. Like that's like the outcome. Like Maxine, I mean, I could keep going on about this, but I think, we're coming up on time. Like, what do you feel like is a loose end in this conversation? What hasn't been said that you feel like should be said? And like, how have you prevented like AI fatigue from like messing up your roadmap?
Yeah. I think to close it out, I think in general, just like from a product management perspective, I do think product management is very different in organizations. And I think that being a product manager at one organization is very different to another one. I think the most important job as a product manager truly, and the people who do it best, is you're responsible for every problem in the business to some extent. If you're not if your company's not growing revenue, if you're not like retaining customers, you're not trying to offer, like, people will say those aren't product problems. They are, and they're very much a problem for you, because that's the only reason you're building product, is to provide like value at the end of the day. I think every product person should think like the CEO or like a co-founder, and I think that enables them to do like their job better personally. So that's what I'd say about like product. In terms of AI fatigue, I say the most important thing is like to have a talk track about the way that you build AI into your product and make that very clear to your market and buyers. So for us, we don't have AI on the end employee chatbot side. We're not an AI chatbot. And people ask for it, and strategic partners ask us why we don't have that, whatever. And the reason is that people are not, like, we don't feel comfortable with the level that AI hallucinates without owning that data. And we don't have access to the data to answer those questions or generate learning on the fly without human approval. We still believe in human approval. That's just one example, but that's like something that we have a strong stance on and helps us prevent from just like adding another AI feature. And I think it's like very important to see like what is the primary value of our product without AI? How does AI enhance that value or help solve the problem better and build it in that way? So that'd be my like recap on avoiding AI fatigue is like an AI feature does not mean that you're like the AI is helping someone do their job better or be more efficient or use the product better. I think it's super important to be mindful of like how it's threaded into a product. And it's just like shipping normal features. Should you ship that feature or should you not? Or is the same sort of evaluation? Just because it's AI does not at all mean that it's providing value.
Yeah. Like you mentioned it, you said it earlier. Like what's an agent? It's just a workflow using AI like in a couple of the steps, right? So when I'd like make AI agents using like Retool for like prototypes, essentially an agent is a system prompt with that like covers all 90% of the system prompt is like what not to do, like what we don't want.
Yes. Yeah.
And then maybe some like context retrieval, like RAG stuff where it's like, okay, like what source material, like, okay. And then here's some like tools, which are just like effectively Zapier workflows hooked up to like AI APIs. So it's like, okay, run a GraphQL query. Okay, use an AI model like step in this like linear workflow to do something. And then then you define the tools and then the agent like triggers the tools when they feel like they need to use it. And so at the end of the day, AI in a lot of those use cases was just better OCR.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's so funny. There's so much hype around AI and I am like definitely optimistic about it and the value it can provide, but I think there's a lot of noise to cut through and a lot of tools that we won't see in a couple of years anymore because they're not really doing that much to provide value, to be honest. But yeah.
Well, the new wrinkle you have in my brain, and like stay tuned listeners, like what I'm going to like the thread I'm going to investigate now is what was all like the media coverage when like Wi-Fi became a thing, or like USB-C or like Wi-Fi 6 or like any other like enabling technology. What was all the hype? You know, what things were considered dead by tech reviewers in those times, and like maybe we could understand how to temper our AI fatigue.
Expectation.
Yeah, just like it's just another enabling
That's a
technology.
great point.
Yeah, like it's finally unlocked reliable OCR. Awesome. Oh, your voice is now the keyboard. Dope.
Yes,
I love it.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of like traditional software, like machine learning algorithms that like go into a lot of these AI products. But
Yeah.
Maxine, how can people find you, and like how do you recommend people find you so that they learn more about your work?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is the best place. So Maxine Anderson on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is crushing it. Seems to be the only place. All right, Maxine, thank you so much for coming on the show. You have a good one.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Hey listener, thanks again for listening to The Way of Product. As we power down today's session on the fusion of creativity and technology, let's solidify the energy you've gotten from our dialogue today. If you've gleaned insights or strategies that could turbocharge your projects, I have a small but powerful ask. Swing by the platform where you're hearing this and leave a review. Think of it as your digital high five to us. It's a fuel that propels this content to more creative technologists like you, amplifying the impact of the shared knowledge. So until our next interview, keep pioneering and pushing the envelope. Thanks again for lending your ears and your imagination to our community. Catch you on the next download.